Welcome. This short video will explain how to complete the Primary Account Holder PAH form to add or change a PAH. This form is applicable to any PAH who needs MES Provider Portal access, including individual providers currently enrolled in Virginia Medicaid, but who do not yet have MES credentials. This form is accessed from the link on the right side of the provider training page. The URL for this page is https://va.dmas.virginia.gov/training/providers. Other links on this page provide additional information, such as FAQs, that you may find helpful when completing this form. So let's take a look at the form now. The first page of the form provides instructions and information to consider when completing the form. Be sure to read this page before completing the form. It indicates important details, such as needing to submit one PAH form for each entity tax ID enrolled with DMAS. This page also includes where the form should be emailed or faxed when completed. Take time to verify the information you provide. If DMAS receives a PAH form that is incorrect or incomplete, the form will be returned to you for updates and access will be delayed. Now, let's look at each item on this form so you know what is being requested. There are two sections in this form. Section A is required for all PAH requests. Section B is required when a disclosed entity is not current or unknown. We will start with Section A. Each required item is marked with an asterisk. The first item is individual or organization name. This required field asks for the legal name of the organization for a group provider or the legal name of the individual provider. The next item, atypical API or National Provider Identifier NPI, is also required. This field asks for the number used as a servicing or billing provider under the tax ID. The tax identification number is a required field that asks for the number used to identify the entity enrolled with DMAS. This number could be a tax identification number, federal employer identification number, or social security number. Remember, you must complete one PAH form for each entity tax ID enrolled with DMAS. This means if a person will be designated as the PAH for more than one entity, a new PAH form must be completed for each entity. The next item in the form is the Pay To address. This required field asks for the mailing address that receives remittance advice. If you are an individual within a group not billing directly, this field is not required. If you do not know the Pay To address on file with DMAS, provide the last two remittance advice amounts for an NPI associated with your tax identification number. The next two items on the form are asking for the first and last name of the current PAH and their email address. These fields are not required, but it is helpful to reference the PAH being replaced when known. Unlike the current PAH fields, the first and last name of the new PAH is required. Remember, one person can be the PAH for multiple entities with different tax IDs, but separate forms must be completed to identify each entity. The new PAH email address is required for all requests. Here is a big difference between the old system and MES Provider Portal. For security purposes, a unique email address is required for each tax ID. This means when one person is the PAH for 4 entities with different tax IDs, that person will need 4 different email addresses, one for each entity, to access the portal and perform tasks on their behalf. Any email address already used to access the MES Provider Portal by a PAH or delegate cannot be submitted on a PAH form because it is already associated with a tax ID.
Similarly, you cannot use an email address already used by a trading partner to access the Electronic Data Interchange or EDI portal or an email address already used to access the Appeals Information Management System, or AIMS portal, because these email addresses are already associated with MES accounts that have different security roles.
The next item is not required, but it is helpful if the new PAH would like to use their mobile phone for multi-factor authentication, or MFA. For increased security, each time a PAH logs into MES, they will be asked to complete this authentication step via email or mobile phone before being allowed to access the portal. The last item in Section A asks for a brief description of why the PAH needs to be added or changed. This field is required. Please be specific to help ensure the form is not returned with a request for clarification. An example of an appropriate description could be, the PAH left the company without transitioning information, or the PAH did not receive MES credentials, but the provider is currently enrolled, and the PAH is correctly identified in the provider's file. Below the table, at the bottom of Section A, there is a place for the individual provider, owner, CEO, or other officer of the company to add their name, title, signature, and date the form was completed. The authorized name is related to the individual identified as an authorized individual in the provider's enrollment file. When DMAS is unable to verify the person on file with the name in this field, the form is rejected. This error is one of the most common reasons a form is returned for corrections. If there is any doubt about the authorized name on file, complete Section B. Now, let's look at Section B. If the disclosed individual on file is not current, if you are unsure of the disclosed individual on file, or if the individual is a newly authorized person, you must complete all items in this section of the PAH form. At least 2 of the first 3 fields must match what is in the provider file for the PAH form to be approved. The first item in this section asks you to identify the current financial institution on file for electronic funds transfer, or EFT. This field is only applicable to providers who receive payments from DMAS. The second item asks for the previous Pay-To address if the answer was unknown to the Pay-To address item in Section A. The third item asks for the address that is on file with the IRS for the tax entity. The fourth item asks for the name of the person signing the form and accepting responsibility for the request to grant PAH access. This information is captured for liability purposes. Below the table, at the bottom of Section B, there is a place for the same individual provider, owner, CEO, or other officer of the company to add their name, title, signature, and date the form was completed. This person is typically the same person who signed Section A. When the form is complete, reference the details on the first page to submit the form to DMAS via fax or email. You are now ready to request PAH updates.